Apple tries to make things as easy as possible and has made the iPhone's camera app as simple as possible. However, there are many useful features hidden behind this simple interface. Today, I will explain all these features to you and I will show you how to get the best results with your iPhone 14, 14 Plus or 14 Pro or Pro Max. I will focus on the photo settings. For the video settings, there will be another video. You can open the camera app in different ways. Of course, by tapping the app icon. In the control center, you will find it in the lower right corner. From the lock screen by swiping to the left or by pressing the camera icon, and also by using Siri. Open camera. When you start the camera app, you will see the last image you captured in the lower left corner. In the middle, there is the shutter button, and with this little circle of arrows on the right, you can switch between the back camera, which is your main camera, and the selfie camera, which is the front camera. In the line above, you can switch between the different modes. On the right, there are the three photo modes: photo, portrait, and pano. On the left, you find the three video modes: video, cinematic, slow-mo, and time-lapse. While photo and video are self-explanatory, you can use portrait to create a blurred background. Although this actually also works with objects, the mode is called portrait because this effect is especially well suited for portraits. In panorama mode, you can capture images with a field of view that is much wider than the camera lens would actually allow. This is especially suitable for landscape photography, for example. The cinematic mode is a kind of portrait mode for video. In slow-mo mode, you can capture slow motion shots, and in time-lapse mode, the camera captures images at certain intervals, which are then merged into a video file. The result is a kind of accelerated video. This is an excellent way to capture passing clouds, for example. But as I said, today we are talking about the three photo modes. Let's first have a look at the different functions of the shutter button. If you want to take a simple photo, of course you tap the shutter button briefly. You can achieve the same result by using the volume buttons. It makes no difference which of the two buttons you use. If you want to quickly capture several photos in a row, you can swipe the shutter button to the left. Now your iPhone will capture photos in an extremely fast sequence until you lift your finger. This is called the burst mode. This feature is often used for photographing action, but it can also help when taking portraits, for example to avoid closed eyes. By the way, in the settings you can also set the burst mode to be activated by using the volume up button. This would be especially interesting if you want to use this mode frequently. If you press and hold the shutter button, the iPhone automatically starts to capture a video. The recording ends as soon as you release the shutter button. This way, you can quickly capture a video without having to switch to video mode first. Apple calls this quick take. If you want to capture a longer video, then drag the shutter right onto the lock. Now the iPhone will continue recording even if you release the shutter button. While recording, you can also continue to take pictures by tapping on the shutter button that appears on the right. You can also start capturing a quick take video by pressing and holding one of the two volume buttons. Now let's take a look at the zoom. Above the menu bar, you can see a small 1x. It is yellow. This means that the main camera is currently active. By tapping on the 0.5 to the left of it, you activate the ultra-wide camera, and via the 3, the camera with the telephoto lens. However, the latter is only available on the 2 Pro models. This also applies to the 2x. However, the 2x does not stand for a fourth camera. It is a digital crop of the main camera. This is made possible by the high-resolution 48 megapixel sensor of the main camera. There is one thing you should keep in mind. Even if it does not look like this on the display, the different lenses have different technical properties. The main camera produces less distortions than the ultra-wide camera, and it has the largest aperture. It can therefore achieve better results in low-light conditions. The telephoto lens produces the least amount of distortion and is therefore best suited for portraits. However, it has the smallest aperture and therefore achieves the worst results in low light. If you now tap and hold one of the numbers, a kind of zoom slider appears and you can swipe left and right to zoom in and out more precisely. For this tutorial, I use an iPhone 14 Pro, so you can see 0.5, 1, 2, 3 and 15 as numbers. 1 stands for the main camera. As you can see, the main camera has a lens that is equivalent to a 24mm lens on a full-frame camera. The ultra-wide lens is equivalent to 30mm and the telephoto lens to 77mm. Everything above 3, on the other hand, results in a digital zoom, which basically leads to a decrease in image quality. 15x, or 15 times zoom, is the maximum on the iPhone 14 Pro. The iPhone 14 and 14 Plus have only a 5 times digital zoom range. To further zoom in, you need to edit your image. You can also zoom in and out by using 2 fingers. In this case, you can always read the current zoom factor here. When you capture a picture with your iPhone, you will of course determine the framing on the display. So what should be on the picture? How should the picture composition look like? Basically, the framing of your picture will correspond to this outer frame. In most cases, you can also see the area outside this frame. This exceeding part is slightly darkened. It is supposed to help you to find the right framing, but it is not captured. For the right composition, the grid also helps you. So you can stick to the rule of thirds, for example, which is important for a good composition. You can activate and deactivate the grid and also the dimmed area outside the frame in the settings. In addition to the right framing, focus and exposure are crucial for a good photo. The iPhone's camera sets focus and exposure automatically and does an excellent job. Faces are recognized perfectly. You can see this by the yellow frame that appears when the camera detects a face. And actually with the iPhone, you can also get a blurred background or foreground naturally. For example, when you capture objects in the near foreground and the background is far away. So it is quite possible that certain areas of the image are in focus and others are not. Therefore, it can sometimes be necessary to adjust the focus manually. You do this by tapping on the object or person in the image that should be in focus. Now your iPhone also adjusts the exposure to the new focus. You can also correct the exposure manually. You do this by tapping on the sun next to the focus square and by swiping up or down. Upwards, the image becomes brighter. Downwards, it becomes darker. And you can also lock the focus and exposure. Suppose you set the focus and/or the exposure manually and want them to stay locked even when you move the phone. You can do this by tapping and holding on the appropriate area. Now the AE/AF lock sign appears in yellow at the top. You can now move your phone without changing focus and exposure. This can be useful, for example, if you want to change the framing after setting the focus. The ultra-wide camera of the iPhone 14 Pro and Pro Max has a very special feature. It can focus extremely close. Apple calls this macro mode, because by getting very close to an object, you can take very big shots of small details. You don't need to have the ultra-wide camera activated for this. The iPhone automatically switches to macro mode when the distance to an object becomes less than 14 centimeters. So if the ultra-wide camera is not active, the iPhone automatically switches from the main camera or telephoto lens to the ultra-wide camera. You will notice this when there are strange image jumps. This happens automatically. If you want to have more control over the macro mode, you can activate the macro control feature in the settings of the camera app. Now, whenever the macro mode is active, a yellow flower appears at the bottom left. By tapping on the yellow flower, you can now also deactivate the macro mode. Personally, I think that the macro mode is a great feature. You should try it out. The results are amazing. Apart from these basic features, there are a few additional settings and features. To use them, you have to open an additional menu. You do this by using the arrow at the top in the middle or by slightly swiping up with your finger. Instead of the different shooting modes, you will now see a series of icons that stand for different features. The icons at the top of the screen indicate which of these features is currently active. On the far left, you will find the flash. You can set it to automatic, on or off. Notice how the flash symbol at the top of the screen changes. If it is very dark, the symbol for the night mode appears right next to it. To show you this, I hold my hand in front of the lens. The night mode will dramatically change the results in low light conditions. Normally, the night mode will activate automatically when it is very dark. When the yellow night mode icon appears at the top, you know that the night mode is now active. In night mode, your iPhone uses longer exposure times. Depending on how dark it is, your iPhone will need a shorter or longer exposure time to get a good result. You can see the duration of the automatically set exposure time right next to the icon. For example, 2 or 3 seconds. During the exposure, you should hold your iPhone as still as possible. Above the shutter button, a timer appears which counts down the remaining time. If you shake or move the iPhone, the device will recognize this and 2 crosshairs will appear, one yellow and one white. You should move the iPhone in a way that the yellow crosshair lies directly on top of the white one. This helps to reduce movement and you can get a better result. You can also change the exposure time yourself by tapping on the night mode icon and moving the slider to the left or right. By moving the slider all the way to the left, you can also disable the night mode. A longer exposure time will not lead to a brighter result, but it could lead to better image quality. It makes sense to increase the exposure time when your iPhone is on a tripod. There will be no movement and you can achieve optimal results. However, if you want to adjust the exposure and brightness of the image when the night mode is active, you can do this by moving the sun icon up or down. By the way, if you're interested in which mini tripods or other accessories I use for my iPhone, check out the links in the video description. The next icon to the right refers to live photos. Here too, the automatic is normally active. You can also turn live photos on or off permanently here. With live photos, your iPhone captures a clip of 1.5 seconds before and after the photo was taken. Therefore, a short video clip of 3 seconds is created. You can watch this mini clip by tapping and holding on the screen while viewing your photo. You can change the so-called key photo within your clip, and you can also add cool effects to your live photo. We will have a look at this in a moment. You can also tell that your iPhone is capturing a live photo by the yellow live icon at the top of the screen. This icon stands for the Photographic Styles. These are not to be confused with filters. In its default setting, the iPhone produces a relatively natural look that is relatively close to reality. Other smartphone manufacturers, for example, prefer a more vivid look with more saturation or more contrast. With the Photographic Styles, you can now change the general look of your iPhone photos. Unlike a filter, it does not simply apply a color to the whole image. Instead, skin tones are still meant to look natural and different objects in the picture are adjusted differently. This is already done when the photo is taken, so unlike filters, you have to adjust the setting before taking a photo and cannot change it afterwards. In addition to the iPhone standard look, there is rich contrast, which provides more contrast and a more dramatic look. Vibrant creates bright and vivid colors. Warm offers golden undertones for a warm look, and cool has blue undertones for a cooler look. Using tone and warmth, you can also adjust the looks yourself. You can reset your own adjustments using the circle on the right. What you have to remember is that once you set a style, it stays set until you change it again, even if you close the camera app. Don't forget this, because otherwise you might take all your photos with a once selected style without really wanting to. With the icon to the right of Photographic Styles, you can change the aspect ratio of your photos. A normal photo sensor delivers a photo in a 4:3 format. You can also set a square aspect ratio or a 16:9 aspect ratio, which is more typical for video recordings. You should not forget that you can also change the aspect ratio when editing your photos. Right next to it, there is a very important feature, the exposure slider. With this feature, you can make your image brighter or darker. That means you can overexpose or underexpose your image a little bit in relation to the settings of the automatic exposure control, and this for a maximum of 2 stops. But wait, wasn't there already the sun icon for that? Yes, but with the exposure slider, you can make smaller and more precise adjustments, and you have a little more control. In addition, the exposure correction will be kept and will stay the same if you take more photos. I have to say that the automatic of the iPhone protects so-called highlights very well, and there are hardly any overexposed areas in the pictures, so for such cases you hardly need any exposure correction. It's more that you might want to capture a darker or brighter image to create a certain mood. The next icon is a timer. This allows you to set that the image is not taken until 3 or 10 seconds after pressing the shutter button. This can be useful if you want to take a group selfie and place your iPhone on a tripod, or in low light with longer exposures to avoid any shaking. On the far right, you will find the icon for the different image filters. The filters change the colors, contrast, white balance, and also the saturation. They are vivid, vivid warm, vivid cool, dramatic, dramatic warm, dramatic cool, mono, silver tone, and noir. Keep in mind that you can add exactly the same filters later when you edit your image. And here you see another yellow icon. You can see the same icon in the top left hand corner. This icon refers to the shared library, and it only appears if you have created a library that you share with friends or family. You create a shared library in the settings of the Photos app. This only works if you have activated iCloud Photos. In contrast to a shared album, photos and videos are shared in full quality. The iCloud storage space is used for this, and everyone who participates can edit and delete any of the photos. When you take a new photo, you can decide here whether the photo should be stored in the shared library or in your personal library. Before we take a look at the portrait mode, I would like to point out that basically the same features are available when using the selfie camera. For example, there is also the night mode or the live photo mode. What there is not is a real zoom feature. You can only slightly zoom in or out by tapping the 2 arrows or by using 2 fingers. It is also interesting that the selfie camera shows you a mirrored image in the preview, but captures the image without mirroring it. The picture then looks different from the preview. If this bothers you, you can change this in the settings. When capturing selfies, remember that you can use the volume buttons as shutter. This is especially useful here. If we now switch to portrait mode, we find the usual settings for flash, eventually the night mode, exposure correction, timer and filters in the menu. Photographic styles and live photo are not available here. However, there are 2 new settings here. Different portrait lighting effects, which you can select here by swiping to the left and right, and the f-stop or depth control as Apple calls it. As explained in the beginning, in portrait mode your iPhone creates a blurred background, as if you had taken the picture with a mirrorless or DSLR and a fast lens. In general, the smaller the number of the f-stop, the stronger the effect will be. That means the blurrier the background will be. The bigger the number, the smaller the effect will be, just like it would be on a bigger camera. Basically, the feature works incredibly well. Only in very small details such as protruding hairs can you sometimes spot imperfections. As already mentioned, the portrait mode also works with objects, but especially with objects, you have to make sure that there is an appropriate distance between camera and object to activate the feature. The camera tells you this at the top of the screen. And portrait lighting is also a great feature. It is designed to simulate professional lighting techniques. If you've been into photography, you'll know that good lighting often makes a bigger difference than the actual camera. You can select different lighting effects by swiping to the left and right. You can also see the effect in the preview. With studio light, the face is well exposed by a soft light. It reminds you of a beauty filter. With contour light, the external areas of the face or the object are darkened a bit. This gives the picture a little more depth and drama. With stage light, the subject is isolated in the spotlight. The outer area is completely darkened. Stage light mono creates the same effect in black and white, and high key light mono does not darken but lightens the outer area, for example like a portrait against a white background. If you find the effect exaggerated or too weak, you can adjust the intensity. In the menu, tap on the portrait lighting icon and now you can adjust the effect by dragging the slider to the left or right. Also note that you can change and adjust the portrait lighting and f-stop when editing your portrait. Here on the left, you can also switch between the main camera, the 2x crop, and the telephoto lens on the 14 Pro and Pro Max. For best results of close-ups of faces, I recommend using the telephoto lens. With the panorama mode, you can capture an extremely wide field of view. As the name suggests, this is great for capturing landscapes or cityscapes. Because of the ultra-wide lens, this feature may have lost some of its importance. Nevertheless, it still produces results that would not be possible with a simple shot. Basically, several images are combined. To do this, start recording and move your camera along the arrow from left to right. If you tap on the arrow, you can also change the direction and capture the panorama from right to left. Make sure that the arrow is moving along the yellow line during the recording. If you do not succeed, you will see unsightly waves in the image. Apart from that, there are hardly any settings in this mode. You can change the lens and that's it. Now let's have a quick look at the editing tools. If you tap on the small image of your last shot in the lower left corner, you will see your last image in full size and can edit it in many different ways. Today, I will only give you a brief overview and point out a few important things. If you swipe through your last photos, you can see in the upper left corner if your photo is a portrait photo or a live photo. If not, this area remains blank. This is important because portrait photos and live photos allow different editing steps. Generally, the editing menu opens by pressing Edit. With the first icon on the left, you can make basic adjustments to the photo. You can adjust the colors, exposure, white balance, saturation, sharpness, and so on. With the second icon, you can apply a filter. These are exactly the same filters that we saw in the capture settings. And by clicking the icon on the right, you can rotate, crop, or adjust the format of the photo. If it's a live photo, you can also change the key photo and the duration of the shot by clicking the first icon on the left. If you tap on the small live icon at the top left, you can add some cool effects to the live photo. You can add a loop to repeat your shot continuously, or bounce to repeat your shot alternately forwards and backwards. I find long exposure especially interesting. This simulates a long exposure. This works well with moving lights or, for example, with water. If your shot is a portrait, as mentioned before, you can use the editing tools to change the portrait lighting and the depth of field, that is the f-stop. Now let's have a look at a few important settings of the camera app. With pre-served settings, you can for example set the camera to remember certain settings. For example, you always want to use the same filter or the same exposure correction, or you always want to start the app in video mode. Live text is a very useful feature. The camera of your iPhone can automatically detect text and you can then copy and edit this text. You don't even have to take a photo for that. When your iPhone detects a text, you can see this by the yellow borders and the small text icon. If you tap on the text icon, you can select parts of the detected text, copy it, use it for a search, translate it, or even share it. This feature can be very useful. If you don't need it, you can deactivate it here in the settings. Also interesting is that you can disable certain intelligent capture features of your iPhone here. Using Prioritize Faster Shooting, multiple photos can be taken more quickly by repeatedly pressing the shutter button. The ultra-wide lens and the front camera create unattractive distortions. They are automatically corrected and removed. Now to very important settings. Under Format, you can choose between High Efficiency and Most Compatible. If High Efficiency is activated, your iPhone saves the photos in the HEIF format. This saves a lot of storage space and the quality is said to be even better than that of a JPEG file. However, older computers and operating systems cannot handle this format. In this case, your iPhone will convert the files into a JPEG file when you transfer them. If you want to save the photos in the JPEG format already on your iPhone, then choose most compatible. If on the other hand you want to edit your photo heavily and therefore want to save as much information as possible in the photo file, then you should activate Apple ProRAW. The photos require considerably more storage space but contain more information for editing and also give you more dynamic range. However, this feature is only available on the Pro models. If you activate ProRAW, you can also choose the resolution of your RAW photo. With the iPhone 14 Pro and Pro Max, Apple has introduced a high-resolution 48 megapixel sensor for the first time. However, your iPhone will only take photos with 48 megapixels if you activate ProRAW and select 48 megapixels here. The high resolution is also limited to the main camera, that is the 1x lens. To take RAW photos, you also have to activate the RAW mode in the camera app. And with this, I want to say goodbye for today. If the video was interesting or helpful for you, give me a like as feedback. If you want to support this channel, you can use the link in the video description to buy me a coffee. If you want to learn more about iPhone photography, check out my tutorials on iPhone photography or editing photos on the iPhone. There will be more videos about the iPhone 14 and 14 Pro, so stay tuned and see you next time.